The truth is that no one is born a king, and even those who carry royal blood can end up lost, consumed by their own pride. Thorin, the Oakenshield, is the kind of character that books don't fully explain, because his story isn't just about dragons and battles. It's about you, about me, about the price paid for wanting what was lost. Many see Thorin as a tragic hero. I see it differently. He was a mirror reflecting those who have fallen, tried to rise, lost their way, but still fought to find themselves. What few know is that behind the beard and armor, there was a man torn between duty and desire. Tolkien's Middle-earth isn't just a magical setting, it's a symbolic field of everything we face in the real world. Exiles, traumas, ambitions, broken friendships, and belated redemption. And if you think this is just another fantasy story, brace yourself, because in the next few minutes, you'll see in Thorin not just a character, but a map, a guide on what happens when we let our ego lead us, and how to return when everything seems lost. If you've ever had to start over, if you've ever trusted the wrong people, or if you've ever wondered if there's still time to change course, then this story is for you. And there's more. There's no beating around the bush here. You're going to learn every detail of Thorin's journey, from the throne to the grave, through decisions that changed the fate of entire kingdoms. And when it comes to an end, you'll realize that true wealth wasn't in the gold of Erebor, but in what remained when he was gone. Few know, but Thorin was born under the weight of royalty and the silence of impending tragedy. Grandson of the venerable King Thror, he came into the world in 2746 of the Third Age, deep within Erebor, the beating heart of the dwarves. Since he was a child, he carried the steady gaze of someone who knew the value of Middle-earth and the pride of belonging to a lineage forged by stone, fire, and history. Only nobility, contrary to what many think, doesn't guarantee protection from chaos. When Smaug descended from the skies like a fiery omen, Thorin watched the ground be swallowed by the ashes of his own home. And it was there, in his early 20s, that he discovered what it meant to lose everything except hope. The escape from Erebor wasn't heroic, it was human. Stifled cries, hands sooty with coal, and the certainty that glory had been postponed, not denied. Along with his people, he went into exile in Dunland, far from gold, but surrounded by something more valuable: survivors. Thorin wasn't yet anyone's king, but he already showed what truly defines a leader, standing tall when everything around crumbled. During that exile, he learned that the world doesn't respect titles, only actions. Middle-earth was full of empty figures, but also of unseen warriors, like the dwarf widows who kept their culture alive while men carried stones. And here lies the first practical lesson. Glory can be reclaimed, but character is revealed through loss. If you've lost something big, think as Thorin would. What still remains in you that can be rebuilt? It's curious how Tolkien weaves Thorin's journey with our own. After all, how many of us haven't felt like exiles in our own story? You lose a job, a relationship ends, you watch a dream crumble. And then, if Thorin had clung to the past, he would never have moved forward. The same goes for you. If you want to rebuild your Erebor, you need to stop visiting the ashes and start stacking new stones, even if they're small. But look, not everything is built with patience. Sometimes life demands contained fury, and that's what began to grow inside Thorin. It wasn't hate. It was a kind of fierce longing mixed with purpose. He didn't yet know how or when, but he swore to himself that one day he would return. And it's precisely when we swear something to our heart and not to reason that the true path begins to form. It was in that silence, between each swing of his axe, that the seed of vengeance began to sprout. And then Middle-earth trembled. It was Thror's death that ignited what had already been silently burning in the dwarves' hearts. And it wasn't just any death, It was a cruel massacre staged by Azog, the Orc of Moria, as a warning, as if to say, "Here dwarves die like dogs." But Thorin heard it as a call. All of Middle-earth fell silent when Thror's head rolled on the ground, but within the dwarves, thunder awoke. They didn't cry, they marched. And when dwarves decide to march, my friend, it's best to get out of the way or start digging your grave. The war of the mountain peoples against the orcs was anything but poetic. It was dirty, brutal, dragged on for years, like that pain that never heals. Thorin, still young, entered the trenches of fury, and it was there that he became a legend. In Azanalbizar, when his shield was shattered, he grabbed an oak branch and used it as protection, not out of heroism, but out of survival. And it was in that seemingly improvised gesture that Thorin Oakenshield was born. Notice how life's great turning points come in the midst of improvisation, in chaos. We plan so much, but it's in the do-or-die moment that our true name is forged. Sometimes all we have is an oak branch, a friend who appears out of nowhere, an opportunity that seemed off, an idea in the midst of despair. Use it. Use what you have. Thorin didn't become a symbol because he won. He became one because he didn't stop. The final battle of that war was a bloodbath. The valley before the gates of Moria turned into an open cemetery, with bodies from both sides piling up like autumn leaves. But the dwarves prevailed, and look, it wasn't a victory with trumpets, it was a victory marked by scars. Middle-earth began to respect the dwarves again, and the orcs came to fear them. Yet even with the victory, something was missing. Thorin had avenged his grandfather, but not reclaimed his home. And here is where many go wrong. Vengeance may warm the heart, but it doesn't build a home. Thorin knew that. He knew that although Azog's blood had been the price paid, Erebor was still in the dragon's claws. The taste of war didn't fill the mountain's void, and the more he looked east, the more he felt that something, or someone, needed to guide him back to his origins. And then, even amidst the ashes of battle, a new idea began to grow. After the war, the dwarves settled in the Blue Mountains. It was there that Thorin began to rebuild, not just a home, but an identity. He founded forges, revived traditions, and restored dignity to his people, even far from Erebor. But there was something that no stone, no matter how precious, could silence: longing. And not that sweet kind of longing. It was the kind that claws inside, that visits you in the middle of the night, as if Middle-earth itself whispered, "Something is still missing." Thrain, Thorin's father, was the mirror of that pain. He wandered restlessly through the corridors of the Blue Mountains, as if searching for something unseen, but deeply felt. A king without a throne, a father without peace. He was the one who most instilled in his son the idea that exile wasn't destiny, but merely a pause. He spoke of the lonely mountain as if describing a lost paradise, and that's what planted an obsession in Thorin, because where most saw longing, he began to see a mission. But one day, Thrain disappeared. He left in secret, carried away by voices only he could hear, or perhaps guided by something he couldn't name but felt he had to follow. He never returned. And it was in that silent loss, without a body, without a farewell, that Thorin became king. Not by coronation, but by absence. Not by choice, but by necessity. And here comes a rare lesson. Sometimes leadership doesn't arrive with glory. It comes in the vacuum, in the emptiness, when someone simply needs to say, "I'll stay." From that moment on, the flame of restoration turned into a promise. Thorin didn't just want to reclaim a palace, he wanted to restore Erebor's pride, its soul, its name. And that, in practice, is what everyone seeks at some point in life. When you look back and feel that something was taken from you, be it time, a dream, or your peace, the desire to reclaim becomes a driving force. And how do you do that? It starts with a plan, with a vision. In the real world, that might mean going back to school, moving cities, saving money, or even starting over at 40, like many who had their Erebor taken by life. But for that, you need more than just desire. You need courage and the right allies. Thorin was no longer the exiled boy. He was a silent king, preparing his return. And at that point, it was impossible not to feel that something big was coming. The kind of change that doesn't arrive with fanfare, but with encounters marked by destiny. And indeed, destiny began to move its pieces, bringing onto the scene a wizard, a map, and a rather unexpected hobbit. It was in one of those twisted turns that only fate understands that Thorin crossed paths with Gandalf. The wizard, always with that enigmatic air of someone who knows more than he lets on, saw far. He saw in Thorin more than a determined dwarf. He saw an ancient spark, something that could rekindle Middle-earth's hope. And it was with him that the most unlikely plan of all emerged, to gather a company and march to Erebor. But of course, it needed something more. It needed a burglar. And that's where Bilbo Baggins comes in, the hobbit who never dreamed he'd get mixed up in any of this. Thorin hesitated. A hobbit? That sounded like a bad joke, but Gandalf persisted. Because sometimes what's missing in our plan isn't strength or strategy, but precisely that unlikely element, the one nobody believes in, but who carries within him a spark of change. It's like in life. Sometimes you need to break out of your bubble and call on someone who thinks differently, who acts differently. The Bilbo in your life might be that crazy idea you never took seriously, that project that seemed too small. Because often that's what changes everything. With the key and the map left by Thror, the mission turned from a dream into a route. They set off in silence, far from parties and songs. It was a journey with the scent of doubt, but the flavor of courage. Middle-earth didn't roll out the red carpet for them. It met them with dangers, trolls, orcs, and the very shadow of doubt. And even so, step by step, they pressed on. Because when you carry a true purpose, fear becomes fuel and not a chain. Thorin knew that, and he taught it with his gaze, not with speeches. A good leader is like that. He speaks more with example than with words. And if you're looking to achieve something great, here's a practical tip. Choose your company. Who are the 13 walking by your side? Friends, partners, mentors. Choose wisely. Thorin didn't pick the strongest. He chose those who trusted him. In the real world, that's worth its weight in gold. A trusted team is worth more than an army of egotists. Deep down, they all knew that this journey wasn't just about treasure. It was about identity, about justice, about everything that time tried to steal. And when you understand that, when your personal Erebor is more than a material conquest, the path begins to make sense. And even when shadows appear on the horizon, you keep going, because it's no longer just a trip, it's a calling. When Thorin finally stepped back into Erebor, the echoes of the ancient halls seemed to whisper his name. The mountain recognized its heir. Smaug, the winged usurper, had been defeated, not by Thorin's hand but by Bard's black arrow. And yet the throne awaited him. The king had returned. Only glory, my friend, doesn't always come clean. There was something in the air, something more dangerous than dragonfire, greed. Erebor's gold, accumulated over generations, whispered to the soul of anyone who dared touch it. And Thorin began to listen. What many call madness was in fact an ancient disease among the dwarves, the dragon sickness. It isn't a common fever. It's an obsession that poisons judgment, turns gold into a god, and distrust into an inseparable companion. Thorin changed. His eyes hardened. His voice lost its warmth. He began to see enemies where there were once allies. He refused to share the treasure with Bard and the men of Dale, even after all they had lost. The elves came to negotiate. Thorin raised walls. The king was back, yes, but the man was lost. Bilbo, who watched it all with the sincere gaze of someone who only ever wanted to return home, saw in the Arkenstone the symbol of ruin, and he made a courageous decision. He handed the stone over to Bard, hoping to prevent conflict. Of course, Thorin saw that as betrayal. He banished him. What a paradox. The Hobbit who helped him reclaim the kingdom was expelled for trying to save him from himself. This happens more often than you'd imagine. When we let pride take over, we push away those who try to save us from the fall. This part of the story is almost a mirror of real life. How many times do we let ambition blind us and start treating allies like enemies? It's a warning. Success without emotional balance becomes a trap. And if you want a practical piece of advice, take note. If you conquer something big, keep close the people who knew you before the glory. They'll remind you of who you really are when the gold starts whispering too much. But even with all that, there was tension in the air. A greater force was approaching. It wasn't just elves or men. It was entire armies, driven by the shadow that never sleeps. And while Thorin locked himself behind Erebor's walls, something was rising outside. Something that didn't respect kings, crowns, or treasures. Destiny had not yet finished shaping his story. And the war, this time, wouldn't be just for gold. The battle of the five armies erupted like an inevitable thunderclap. Dwarves, elves, men, orcs, and eagles clashed on a field where the sky seemed to weigh down. And in the midst of that chaos, Thorin finally awoke. As if the dust of greed fell from his eyes, he saw the error, saw the chasm between the king he dreamed of being and the tyrant he nearly became. He decided to fight, not for treasure, not for glory, but for honor. Alongside Fili and Kili, his nephews, he ran into the heart of the battle. And there he met his fate. Mortally wounded, Thorin had time to do something few leaders do, acknowledge his faults. He called for Bilbo, the hobbit he had banished, and asked for forgiveness. He spoke words that didn't sound like those of a king, but of a man who understood the price of pride. If more of us valued food, joy, and songs above gold, the world would be a happier place. That phrase is worth more than all of Erebor's treasure. It speaks of priorities, of a life worth living. Thorin passed with peace in his heart. And that, my dear, is rare. His body was buried deep within the mountain, with the Arkenstone over his chest and his sword by his side. Not out of vanity, but as a symbol, so that Middle-earth would remember who he was and what he became. They say the blade still glows when it detects enemies approaching Erebor, as if Thorin's spirit still watches over his home. A powerful metaphor. Even after death, his story continues to protect those who come after. It makes us wonder, what legacy do we leave behind? How many times do we let our ego dictate our decisions? Thorin shows us that true power lies in the ability to change before it's too late. And if it is too late, let it be with sincere regret. It's like investing in a company that went bankrupt but taught you everything about the market. Sometimes failure is the best school. And in the end, what counts isn't whether you fell, it's how you got back up, or how you chose to move on. And even with everything said, felt, lived, there's still something in the air. Because Middle-earth never truly rests. It watches, waits, whispers, and where there is an echo of courage, there's always a chance for rebirth. Who knows, the story of Thorin, told in silence by the mountain stones, might just be waiting for the next one to listen. And now that you know Thorin's entire journey, tell me, what would you do differently if you knew that pride can cost you everything? How many times have you been one step away from achieving something, only to sabotage it all out of fear, ego, or stubbornness? The story of this dwarf king isn't just about battles, it's about decisions. And more than that, it's about redemption. Because if even Thorin, in his final moments, found the humility to ask for forgiveness, then why are you still waiting to change the course of your story? Maybe you're in exile, maybe you're in the middle of the battle, or perhaps you're already sitting on the throne, surrounded by gold and feeling a void you can't explain. At any of these points, Thorin's journey offers you a choice: to continue as you are, or to take control and transform everything. And for that, you need to ask the question that few have the courage to face. Who is the true king of your mountain, the ego or you? The answer is hidden within, tucked away in the caverns of your very own personal Erebor. And if you want to keep unraveling these stories that blend fantasy with truth, Tolkien with reality, Thorin with you, then subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and come along with me. Because here, every video is a journey, and the next one might just be yours.